Pop quiz. Your audition notice says that they require word perfect, but in the same casting notice, they say performer not required to memorize lines. What? Let's talk about this situation and memorization in general. Hey everyone, I'm Matthew Cornwell with Get Taped here in Atlanta, Georgia, one of Atlanta's original audition taping services, which I co-own with my amazingly talented, beautiful wife and best friend, Brooke. All right, let's just jump right in. Memorization is not the same thing as word perfect. A lot of actors get these two phrases mixed up. And let me give some backstory as to why these phrases are showing up more and more in the last couple years in your audition notices. A year and a half, 2 years ago, some actor found in one of the original SAG contracts from the 1930s that an actor must be paid for their audition. Now, that's how it got spread through the internet. The part of the sentence that they left off, maybe intentionally or not, is if they're required to memorize lines. And so that clause still holds true today, that if you are required to memorize your lines for an audition, you have to be paid for that audition. And so casting is now specifically putting into the audition notices, and again, this is for SAG-AFTRA projects, that the performer is not required to memorize lines. But in the same notice, sometimes they say that you have to be word perfect. Well, how can you reconcile that? Hold the script. Just hold your script, for crying out loud. And so that I don't lose my emotional cool, I'll refer you to my video I did just the other week on the lost art of cold reading. But what's the deal with word perfect? Why is that so important to casting? Well, it's because it's so important to that showrunner, if it's a TV show, or that writer, if it's a movie. Let's take TV, for example, and imagine that you're a staff writer on a hit television show, and this is your episode. In other words, you're going to be the head writer for this particular script. And so you still have the showrunner above you, so you don't have the last say. So when you submit your draft for this episode, of course, you're going to get notes from that showrunner, maybe even from that writer's room. I don't know. I've never been in one of those. But I do know that in addition to those notes, once the writers are all happy, they have to submit that to the studio. Well, the studio is going to have notes. It's going to get rewritten. Well, now the network is going to have notes. It's going to get rewritten. So by the time it gets to your inbox as the actor, how dare you give them notes? I know it sounds harsh, but put yourself in that writer's shoes. It feels like an affront on their talent. It feels like a disrespect to them that they already went through all the notes from the people above them. So now they're getting notes from that person who is not yet even hired for the project. Yeesh. So right away, I could just end the video there because it's a matter of respect. Respecting the person who already has the job versus the person, you, who is trying to get the job. So why would you want to compromise your chances of getting booked, specifically when it says in the breakdown that the showrunner or the writer responds well to word perfect, or some other verbiage that leads you to believe that if you miss one word, you're not getting hired? Now, I can already hear one argument, which is comedy versus drama. In comedy, yeah, I get it. It's more important to be word perfect. But in drama, you can kind of be more loosey-goosey. Okay, well, what if the showrunner is Aaron Sorkin or Stephen Conrad or Mike O'Malley? All of those showrunners, and I'm sure many more, want you to be word perfect, even for drama. And a helpful analogy is to think about Shakespeare. 500 years later, are we changing his words? No. So when a writer is at the top of their game, why would you want to change their words? There's an old myth of Neil Simon in one of his play rehearsals. An actor was on stage and asked, "Hey, Mr. Simon, do you mind if I change this punchline?" To which Neil Simon replied, "Sure. If it's funnier, we'll keep it. If not, you're fired." So again, you need to respect the position that person is in. So already the lesson is, don't be flippant about paraphrasing the writer's words intentionally. If it happens accidentally and you change one word or drop a preposition and it doesn't change the meaning of the line and it was a great take otherwise, well then maybe you don't need to do another take. But if you're improvising all over the place and you're thinking that you're better than the writer, this is a cautionary tale. And that leads me to buttons. Be very careful about adding extra dialogue at the end of the scene. I'm very guilty of this, but I'm very strategic at the same time when I'm going to put a button into an audition scene. In fact, I just finished a workshop with a casting director who does television comedy, and they specifically said that in the show that they were a casting associate on for 11 seasons, the showrunners, if they were passed along an audition tape that had a button, they refused to hire that actor. So these casting associates and the casting director, they would edit out your button if they loved your tape otherwise. And how are you supposed to know if that showrunner hates buttons or loves buttons? Well, if it's not specifically in the casting notice that they love buttons, then be very careful about it. So now that I've potentially scared you into word perfect, let's talk about memorization. When should you endeavor to be fully memorized off book versus still holding the script because you're going to have to reference it every now and then? Here's a quick tip. If it's under 5 lines, memorize it, even if you have 6 hours, because that's a skill that you will need on set. They change dialogue on set all the time. They will add monologues, give you new pages the morning that you arrive on set. So if you can't memorize 5 lines in a less than half an hour, then you need to get into some sort of class or learn a new memorization technique. Now, I also want to mention right here that some people will put their lines on a prompter for their audition, a teleprompter. And that's fine if you are very proficient at teleprompter. Otherwise, casting can tell that you're reading your lines off of a teleprompter and then waiting for the other person to read theirs, but you're still reading along while the reader is reading their lines. If you are a newbie to teleprompter, then you are forbidden to use that for your audition. But if you're a seasoned pro, have at it if you know what you're doing. And if the script is longer than 5 lines, or it's a couple pages or a few scenes, then it becomes a balance of your resources. Do you have time to memorize and do great script analysis? Okay, have at it. But if memorization will compromise your ability to have time for script analysis and character analysis, then maybe you should table the memorization and instead focus on what is much more important, which is connecting to the character. Because again, even if you think you need to be word perfect, you can always hold the script. I promise you. And here's another side note. Your audition prep is a journey from your head to your heart or your gut, your soul, something like that. At first glance, when you're looking at your audition notice and reading your script and see how many lines you have, everything is very cerebral at that point. And as you start to get into the character and into the lines and researching the project, the material starts to move from your head down into your heart and your guts and your soul and all those places. And it's crucial. You need to get out of your head. Get out of your head. And then get into your heart. Get into your heart. Because otherwise you'll just look like a person reading words to an imaginary visual off camera. This is why you hear words like grounded or rooted as things you want to endeavor to achieve in your acting. Now, for some actors, not being 100% memorized and holding the script, that actually puts them into their head because they know at some point they're going to have to look down and that takes them out of the scene. For other actors, let's say you're able to cram those lines into your short-term memory, well, then trying to access those lines from memory makes you feel less grounded in your character. And so for that actor, you'll feel great holding your script. Everyone is different, so you need to discover your process. Ultimately, you're trying to remove all the noise from your head before you step into that taping room or onto that Zoom call or into that callback session, etc. So if memorization causes noise, hold the script. If looking down at the script causes noise because you feel like you're being disconnected, then memorize. In the end, what you need to do, which we repeat in many different ways on this channel, is figure out what will make you feel empowered. Well, short of intentionally butchering the lines. Just like you are seeking to be seen, understood, validated for your art, for your contribution, the writer is fighting that same battle. But you're not on opposing sides. You're yes-anding each other. It's a collaboration. But at this stage of the game, at the audition, when the writer has the job and you don't, defer to their words, please. Now, I realize I didn't talk about terrible writing, which does exist. That's a higher level discussion. I mean, there are terrible writers out there who are producing work at an alarming rate. It just sort of boggles the mind. But that's the exception, not the rule. And unless you can create an intelligent argument as to why this writing is subpar, then you really don't have a leg to stand on. So in other words, if you can't say with confidence that you know more than the writer, you have more experience, more knowledge, and you can back it up, then treat their words with respect. the same respect you're hoping to get when you book the job. Now, sometimes it's not necessarily terrible writing, it just looks like grammatically something is wrong. Well, let me give you a story that might provoke you to email your agent the next time this happens. I was looking at a script that an actor had for an audition. It was a big NDA project, so it was dummy sides, at least we thought. Well, I actually followed up with the casting director, who I know personally, and when they responded to me, they said, oh, it was actually pieced together from two separate scenes. They were trying to make it simpler and easier for the actor to just sort of segue into the second part of the scene. But in doing so, it looked weird. It didn't seem to make sense how the first half of the scene transitioned into the second half. So I could have argued that it was bad writing or some sort of oversight. But my instincts were such that I reached out to that casting director, found out that it was just a case of copy and paste of two different scenes, and that the actor should not really worry about this logic gap that existed in the scene. The moral of that story is, if you are at a point where you can discern something is fishy, something is awry, then please email your agent to get some clarity from casting. Don't waste that precious 48 hours that you might have to prep for this audition thinking about this thing that might be cleared up with a simple email to your agent. Okay, I might have ruffled some feathers on this one or just created more questions. If so, drop a comment or question below. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on set.